Good evening. Well, let me tell you, all over the country today, there have been a series of incidents that highlight just how much of an emergency what is happening in the English Channel is becoming. Not just the conditions at Manston and Boy. The government must be relieved that it's blowing southerly gales every day this week. It must have eased at least a little bit of the pressure. But let's start with what happened this afternoon at a hotel in Essex, a Holiday Inn in Essex. I'm about to show you some pictures on the screen, and it's quite extraordinary, really.
دنيانزا لولاتی بریتانیا ام حالاتی لوتیل فنابرا على خوما كشم يصير بسجن لموتيلا لفر موتوري كوتوي نخواري من عيني نيشت من عيني ام فيديو بس شبكه داي تاراوغا على خوما كشم لموتيلا كسرنا انا ما نو كسر متي ما هذا لنا سيرفيس فران داينو
A travelling salesman or woman, but that Holiday Inn is not good enough for those that have crossed the English Channel in a boat, and they're protesting. They want better food and better conditions. I'm not sure the Savoy would make some of these people happy. I found that unbelievable. Then we go up to the Wirral. I mentioned the Wirral last night. I mentioned the fact the chief executive had sent out an email saying to councillors that they would now have to take their burden of Albanians, having already had migrant hotels in the town. Almost unbelievably, and really you couldn't make this next story up, a group of RNLI volunteers were staying up in Hoylake. The reason is they've got an inshore hovercraft there. They were being trained in its use. Whilst they were out on exercise, their belongings in their hotels were packed into suitcases. The suitcases left in reception. Another hotel in the area booked for them, and the reason they've been turfed out is because 40 Albanians have been moved into the hotel. The very organisation that helped to get these people across the English Channel have now lost their hotel rooms in favour of Albanians. And then I saw this, a tweet put out by a Radio Kent producer. We have hundreds of mostly Albanian service users not claiming asylum, being bailed and dropped at mid-Kent train stations with no follow-up where they go or if they leave Kent, and I'm told no proper security checks on who they are. They've come into the country, they haven't claimed asylum, they've been bailed and literally dumped at train stations in mid-Kent. And all of this, by the way, all of this I've learned in the course of the last 2 hours. And finally, a letter from a chief executive of Kent County Council and of Medway too, and indeed signed by all of the council leaders in Kent, talking about conditions. And there is a line in this letter that sticks very firmly in my mind. It says, put simply, Kent is at breaking point. That's a phrase that I warned of in the referendum 6 years ago and was thoroughly vilified for doing. Put simply, Kent is at breaking point. And just an example of that, just one little example of that in a very comprehensive letter. Secondary schools in Canterbury and Ashford currently have no year 7 places, year 7 to 9 places available for local children. So there are places available to children put on dinghies that cross the English Channel, but if you live in Ashford, if you live in Canterbury, you will not be getting your kid educated in a local school. I hope those 4 little examples of what I've learned just this afternoon about what's going on around this country makes you realise that this is now genuinely an emergency. And my audience question for you is, will Sunak be sunk by the migrant crisis? Farage at gbnews.uk.